Lonely Monk Productions. I don't know if y'all have heard Cooler Talk by Bacchi yet, but yo.
That's my Jawn!
Hey, yo, displace the guilt and embrace the pleasure. You're tasting things that don't need to be measured.
What's good, friends and family, neighbors near and far? Welcome to an all-new episode of the Yo, That's My Jawn podcast. The podcast, website, brand, movement, way of life dedicated to the embrace and championing of your passions. I am your host, Nate Runkle, a.k.a. Jawn Stanley, a.k.a. the guy who may just stare at the solar eclipse if his glasses don't arrive on time, a.k.a. Nate 3.0. Back at it again with yet another episode of the podcast. As always, I hope this podcast finds you all in good health and in good spirits. On today's episode, I am joined for a chat by Eliza Hardy-Jones of Buried Beds, The War on Drugs, and so many other projects. We talk about her soon-to-be-released sophomore solo album, Pickpocket. We talk about quilting and grief. And yes, we talk about her role in the two highly successful Philadelphia Eagles Christmas albums. And all of that is coming up in a bit. But first, happy Eclipse Monday, folks! I hope you are all getting to or have gotten a chance to watch the moon so rudely upstage the sun like it's Kanye at an award show. I'm gonna let you finish, son, but Beyonce is the brightest star of all time. Yeah, man, exciting times. We got the eclipse today. We had the earthquake this past Friday. You know, just nature doing nature things. You ever feel like the earth wants to evict us? You know, like we're not only late on the rent, but we trash the whole place? Yeah, it feels like that way sometimes, doesn't it? But things are good. Radio show has been going great every Monday from 5 to 8 p.m. on Why Not Radio, available online on your smart speaker or by downloading the Why Not Radio app in your app store. We got a new episode of Oops All Bards out this week, and that project I have been alluding to for a few weeks now is about to launch. And so I guess I can finally tell you, I have a new show coming out alongside Bruce Warren of WXPN called Too Old, Too New. It's a music discovery podcast where every week, Bruce and I each bring you two songs, one old and one new. And then we have a conversation about why we connected with it. It's a play on Something Borrowed, Something Blue, but it also gives us Something Nate, Something Bruce. We recorded the first episode this past Thursday, and it was a whole lot of fun. And I'm really excited to bring that to you. So by the time you hear this, the trailer should be available and that podcast subscribable in your podcast app. Is subscribable a word? Probably not. It is now. I'll have a link to it here and on the socials as well. You know, the two best ways to stay on top of everything and up to date with all that's going on is to visit www.yothat'smyjawn.com and sign up for the mailing list and follow us on the socials. There are links to do both of those things there, as well as links to the website, links to guest appearances I've made on other podcasts, merchandise, and so much more. So head on over to www.yothat'smyjawn.com and get to clicking. Okay, one last thing. Next week is a scheduled off week, but I have a very special episode that I will be releasing in honor of Record Store Day. So be on the lookout for that. Okay, on with the show. My guest today is a member of the Grammy Award-winning band The War on Drugs and is the vocal coach for and performer on the hit holiday records A Philly Special Christmas and A Philly Special Christmas Special. She is also a multi-instrumentalist who has performed with Iron and Wine and Grace Potter, amongst others. On April 19th, she is set to release her sophomore solo record, Pickpocket, a 10-song LP that explores surviving grief, birth, death, and the innate humanness surrounding a challenging and personal journey to becoming a parent. Folks, it is my honor to welcome to the show, Eliza Hardy-Jones. Ladies and gentlemen, I am joined today by the great Eliza Hardy-Jones. Eliza, thank you for joining me on Yo, That's My Jawn.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So I always like to start with a little dumb tidbit or factoid. And here's a weird one that I only just found recently. So 2 weeks ago, give or take, I just started DJing Monday nights, 5 to 8 on Why Not Radio. And I hear that's your neighbors. I hear you
Yes.
guys.
Yes, yes, yes. We are neighbors. I see him across the street at the clay studio all the time, and yeah, he's
That's
great.
awesome. That's so
Yeah,
cool. Yeah,
yeah,
what a cool little piece of Philadelphia that station is. Like, I'm glad to be a part
yes.
of it.
Oh
I'm
my
honored.
gosh, yes, yeah. I feel like Why Not has always been so supportive of my music, not just as my solo music, but back in the day when I was part of Buried Beds, I felt like Why Not was always like the first, like, we've got you, like we're gonna, so it's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something beautiful and something that like the spirit of kind of what this show is like I like kind of finding those people who like I just want more people to know about,
Yeah.
and kind of shining a light on them, and it's great. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Like, where did you grow up?
I grew up here. I grew up on 63rd and Sherwood, so out in Overbrook. And then when I was a teenager, my folks moved out to Westchester, which is, the burbs, but not too far. And then I moved back right after college. So I'm a Philadelphia born and raised, and like very much a West Philadelphia. I'm a West Philadelphia through and through. That's it. I've been in this house for 17 years with my
Wow.
husband. So we're never leaving.
I love it. I love it. That's it. Those are the kind of roots that we like. Like,
Yeah.
once it's in you, you can't get rid of it.
Yeah.
What was music like in your household growing up?
Oh, I grew up in a super musical household. I was super into classical music, so I played classical piano. My grandparents, my father's parents, met in a pit orchestra. My grandmother was a violin player and a fiddle player. I grew up going to fiddle conventions and teaching first time fiddlers workshops. And my dad's family all plays like old time bluegrass music, but then also have classical music roots. So his aunt was an opera singer. My dad's sister was a professional ballerina. My mom's side of the family, which is like sort of less bohemian, also still tons of musicians. So I feel like my house growing up, there was always lots of harmony singing, lots of sort of old time folk music, but then also lots of classical music. My brother is an incredible musician. He still is an incredible musician, makes a lot of records. But when we were younger, he was in a punk band. So there's a lot of punk music. So eclectic mix, but music was definitely sort of like the center of our family life.
Yeah. Was there ever any period, any rebellious period where you were like, I'm not doing music like everybody else, or was it
Oh,
always no, it was always all in?
no. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, especially for me, um, like I just that it was just always what I wanted to do. I always wanted to be a professional piano player. I wanted to be a classical pianist. I also wanted to be the first female NFL football player and then play classical piano in the off season. That was like my big goal. But since I'm 5'3" and a little small and not actually very athletic, my dreams did not come together.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah,
I mean, and we'll get to it much later, but you did get to play a part in the NFL.
yes, I did. My dreams do come true.
That's exactly what I was just gonna say. So you started with piano. Were you in like was it a quick adaptation for you, or
No, I mean, I really like through college was just like, I'm going to be a classical pianist. Like, that's what my efforts and attention were on. When I was in high school, I started teaching more with my grandmother. And so like, my senior year, I was down in Virginia with her, and she was like, "You're going to teach this guitar lesson." And I was like, "I don't play guitar." And she was like, "Here's a D chord. Now you play guitar." And I was like, "Oh." It worked out fine. There's a lot of old time songs with just one chord, so I could get through the one lesson. But I feel like I really stuck in that sort of world until after college. Then I moved back to Philadelphia, and I moved into like a big, crazy art house in West Philly with my best friend. And he and I started a band together. And I feel like he was really the one that was like, "You should play electric guitar." And I was like, "I can't plug an instrument in. Like, I don't know what we're talking about here."
yeah,
So it was a slow evolution for me from like just like living in my sort of classical universe to like being in a rock and roll band and like having guitar pedals and plugging things in. And like It definitely was not like I think I had a very different trajectory than my peers who are
Yeah.
also in rock and roll bands, you know. I was not like as a teenager like turning up the music and jamming on a guitar. I was just like, I love Chopin, you know.
Yeah. Were you writing any pieces, like any kind of classical stuff, or?
I mean, I think I always like wrote little songs. Definitely actually more on the guitar. Like once I learned the guitar, and because my family all played, you know, old time bluegrass music, I would write kind of like old timey folk songs
Mm-hmm.
um, for fun. But it really was like Buried Beds, which was my band that I had in Philadelphia for, you know, over a decade with my best friend Brandon Beaver. Um, that was like really the beginning for me of like writing songs. And it honestly just started where, you know, I had moved in with Beaver and a bunch of friends, and he and I just on a, you know, for fun one weekend, we're like, let's write some songs together. And then at the end of that weekend, we're like, oh, this was really fun. Like, what if we were a band? And then just kind of like built it from there. So really that was the beginning of writing songs and learning how to be in a band and learning how to like release some of the baggage of classical training.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, when you start adding in like guitar and stuff like that, like you said, like it's like getting a whole, it's like moving from watercolors to like acrylics, and like, you know,
Yeah.
it gives you a whole different kind of flavor. So you know, working kind of in that early collective and stuff like that. So this is what I'm kind of beating around trying to get to is collaboration seems to play very key in your entire musical journey. Have you ever been curious enough to want to do everything by yourself, or do you feel like working with other people kind of unlocks what is special about the stuff that you create?
Yeah, I think that I've always felt like, you know, music and conversation is is more fun for me. And I think part of that is like, you know, growing up being I still play classical piano. Like I still wake up and pull out my whatever, my Debussy or my Chopin. Like it's still a huge and important part of my life. But it was a lonely piece of my life, I think, as a young person, because it's not like I was in an orchestra or, you know, playing. And it was something that I felt really connected to and that I loved to do. But it was like the old time folk music that I was able to like play with other people and sing harmonies and just kind of be bad at the mandolin, but still get to play it. Like that was a real, that sort of feeling of connection was something that I loved so much. And starting to, you know, joining this band and being in a band and being able to make music with other people was just so exciting and so fun. Um, it, I don't know that I would want to just like, here's what's in my head without the conversation. Like I love
Yeah.
to have the conversation with collaborators. And sometimes, you know, that's a small collaboration. Sometimes it's just like collaborating with the engineer who's going to mix it. And I did do most of it. But I just, especially when making a record, like I just really want to hear what other people would bring to the table because it's really inspiring and I feel like it has me dig deeper and you know, just like I think a lot of musicians have an experience of like as you're working on a record, you fall in and out of love with it. Like you
Yeah.
end some days in the studio and you're like, man, like this is the best thing I've ever done. And then you go in the next day and you're like, I don't know what I was thinking. Like, I have no business making music. This is true garbage. I hate this. I can't believe they let me do this. And I feel like being able to like, you know, send it to a friend and be like, hey, you know, put some bass down on this. And then when it comes back, I think being able to like shine my love on friendship sort of pulls it away from like self-doubt,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because just like, oh my God, my friend's amazing. You know, I sent it to Dave Hartley to send me back this bass line. It's the greatest thing I've ever heard. He's like the best. And then I think less about like being self-conscious about the lyrics or being self-conscious about my voice or whatever it is that sort of like burrows its way into your head. It's just more fun for me. So I have never wanted to do it totally on my own. I think also like I just know that I'm good at certain things.
Yeah.
and I should do those things.
That makes sense. No, it totally makes sense. You know, it's weird because I used to play music and I used to play in bands and stuff like that, and I hadn't for a very long time. And then I started doing this podcast, and now I'm like inspired to kind of get back into it and things. And like one of the things that has really excited me is been thinking about, like, I meet all these people and now I just want like them to just put their little touch on things. But I'm nowhere close to being there yet. But I spent so much of my life kind of avoiding that because of, you know, you mentioned the self-doubt, because I'm just like, all right, this isn't good enough for me to waste somebody else's time to put on. So like I would focus on things by myself. And then when I was in bands, like, and I would finally get this opportunity, I'd be like, well, this isn't how it sounded in my head, so now I don't like it. You know what I mean? So like I would have like these different things of like, all right, this is for me, this is for the band. I can't let these two things. Whereas now, and maybe it's just me getting older, like now I want everybody to put a little something on everything. Like the idea of community and that communal spirit like excites me more than just what's going on in my head.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like, you know, music is about community. I mean, it's also not about community, but I think so much for me, like my life as a touring musician, it's all about community. It's about like living on a bus with people and traveling through the world and then getting up on stage and like sending energy out into the world and having the crowd send it back to you. Like it's all about that conversation. And it's, you know, it's a really unique thing to get to experience. I think that's the thing that people don't, you know, get in their lives in other ways. So I feel like I just really lean into the idea of like, this is how I can stay connected to my friends and stay connected to, you know, strangers.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny, you know, I talked to somebody about this once that like, I feel like music, it can be, you know, when people say they have like a religious experience listening to music, like it makes sense to me because like that congregation, like that is the spirit of the church. Well, what should be the spirit of the church, you know, it doesn't always tend to be, but
necessarily,
but you know what I mean? Like that is what people are trying to capture. And like, that's the magic of music to me. Like I love going to live shows and I love kind of experiencing things with other people. Not always. Sometimes, you know, people in the audience suck, but when it's dialed in and everybody's into it, like there's nothing better than that.
Yeah, it's so fun to be so connected to strangers. It's like it's such a unique thing. I think so often in life, like and I think more and more just the way that culture is moving is sort of like this idea of an us against them and really pitting you against the unknown and pitting you against, you know, who you think the people around you are and what you think those people believe and what that means about who they really are. And I think when you're at a concert or experiencing art in some ways, or you're at a sporting event, you know, like that you have this as a collective comes together and is having this sort of singular experience. And it's literally physically vibrating you, right? Like it's vibrating you in the same way. You feel connected to those people. And that's a beautiful thing. That's like a really, like, I feel like being at a concert and like being at the Sixers game, you know, it's like you have that same feeling as you're walking out and you start high-fiving people and you start like looking at people like, oh man, that was right. It was incredible, right? You know?
Yeah.
It's great.
Well, it's like, I think about when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, we just happened to be down in the city at my sister-in-law's house and we spilled out onto the streets and I've never experienced like joy like that. Like it was madness. Like, and look, when I started hearing the police have conversations about just form a line and start pushing, I was like, okay, the fun's over. But up until that point, before they started pushing, but like you said, high fiving people and stuff like that, and like and a great concert is like that when you can just turn to someone and you're just like, my God, can you just believe how amazing? Like I went to your friend Tim Showalter. I went to the second date of the December shows that he did at Johnny
Winter
Brenda's.
Classics. Yeah,
and he played his new album in its entirety. and
Amazing.
like everybody was completely blown away. And afterwards, like I was having conversations with strangers, like I didn't, yeah, I didn't see that coming. Like I don't know if you've heard it yet, but it's like a dance record, and like it's amazing. Like it's
That's
absolutely
awesome.
amazing. But like those moments are just like when you recognize that you're experiencing something special. I just
Yeah.
wish we could channel that out into the world. Like if it
Yeah.
could just continue on, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a healing thing. Music is a healing thing for sure.
Yeah. So you guys form Buried Beds, and you know you very successfully create some beautiful music together. How does then becoming like an auxiliary player for other people like come out of that? Like, do people just kind of recognize you on the album and say, "Hey, can you come do that for me too?" Or
Yeah, I mean, I think that for both Beaver and I, we had done Buried Beds for a little over a decade. It felt, I think, to both of us like it had always been this very specific project for us in terms of like the writing and the music. And it just kind of felt like it was like, all right, maybe we've come to the end of this idea and we're excited about something else. And because we had had the incredible opportunity to go on these incredible tours with amazing bands, it just sort of like connected us to a new world, right? Whereas like in Philadelphia, I mean, both of us ended up just joining other Philadelphia bands, but I
right.
think when you're in your own band, nobody's thinking like, I should poach Eliza from her own band and she'll just be a backup player in my band, right? That doesn't happen. But as we started to be out on tour with people and we started to kind of like sit in with other people's bands and and I think also for me, like I didn't know that I was capable of that. I thought I was only capable of like, I'm going to learn what I need to learn. I'm going to express myself, and that's what I'm capable of doing. In order to like say like, oh, sure, like I'll just be in your band and I'll figure that out. Like that's a totally different piece of your brain. But Beaver ended up joining Me Without You, which is an incredible Philadelphia band. And he carried that out basically until they broke up just recently. And for me, I sort of like just took one step for years and years. I played with the Mural and the Mint, which is a Philadelphia band. And then that brought me to Strand of Oaks. And then from Strand of Oaks, I went to Grace Potter. And then from Grace Potter, I went to Iron and Wine. And then from Iron and Wine, I ended up with the War on Drugs. And it's all just like, it's all just friendship connections, word of mouth. Like I was never like on a job board,
Right.
auditioning. It was always like oh, hey, this person told me that you would be good at this and we could do this. And like, let's just see what this is like. And honestly, the Grace gig was that first time where I was like, truly like, I do not know any of these people. This is not the music I'm used to playing. And I just had a conversation with Grace and she was like, why don't you just like fly out to LA and we'll just like see what it's like. And if it's not good, you'll just fly home. And I was like, sure, why not?
Yeah.
But it was really, I sort of didn't know if I would be good at it, at like learning somebody's entire back catalog and showing up at rehearsals and like having something to contribute. But it turned out I was good at that. And it was super fun.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because that's kind of what I wanted to get to, which is how do you kind of put your own thing jumping into somebody else's back catalog? Like it's different when you join someone like, like War on Drugs or something like that, where you're a part of the process, at that point. But like jumping in on somebody who has a catalog, how do you kind of I don't want to say not get bored, like because bored's not the right word, but how do you find the interest to kind of put the passion into it on something that already exists?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of that is like when you play classical music, right? Like the whole idea is that like you become the voice of the composer. So it's like when I'm playing a Rachmaninoff prelude, I'm not thinking like I'm aping Rachmaninoff. I'm thinking like this is now it's almost like you're like giving your monologue, right? Like you're an actor. Like you are using those words to express your truest self. And so I think like I'd had so much practice of that, of like using somebody else's creation, using somebody else's song and channeling myself through that. And so I think like, with somebody like Grace Potter, where it was like this musical style is like something so different from me. but I could channel myself through it. I could say like, oh, this is like, it's just like Grace's music is all about community and fun and ecstasy. And, like all of this is just like, it's about creating a magical, fun experience. And so I was like, well, I love fun. So I'll just be really fun. And like the first gig, she was like, if you don't know what to do, just dance. And I was like, I shall dance then, because I do not know what I'm doing. But I think I also learned really early on that like, even though people are saying like, okay, here are my 7 records that you need to learn, and this is what we're going to be doing for the tour, they also don't want you to just like do what's there. They want you to bring something new. Like they don't want to be bored either. They want to hear something new. And so it's about like figuring out like, how do I serve the writer? How do I serve Sam Beam in Iron and Wine? It's going to be really different from how I am serving the voice of Grace Potter. Like those are the opposite gigs, but both things where it's like what I brought to those was really uniquely me. And I think that's why I kept those gigs. I think it's why they liked to have me, is because it was like, oh, you're bringing something new, but you're also respecting the voice. So it's about like, how can I put myself here? And honestly, also both like Grace Potter and Iron and Wine, who I'm sort of focusing on because those were the bands I was with the longest. It's very different every night. There's a lot of improvisation. There's a lot of looseness. There's a lot of like, let's play this song completely different tonight. We're not going to rehearse it. Just go with it, and it's like, okay.
Yeah.
And that is
awesome.
all about like trusting each other. And I think like trusting that like, I'm not just going to like ham fist my own voice there. It's like, I'm going to be myself, but I'm going to be myself through the prism of what you are creating.
Yeah. So in all of this, 2016, you do Because Become. Like when did you know it was time to kind of bring the focus back home, so to speak, to present your own stuff to the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I always there's such a joy to just being in somebody's band, because you never book a show, you never worry about ticket sales, you never worry about travel, you never worry about like, you just literally, it's like the best job ever. You just show up and you play the music and it's awesome, and you just get to have fun and you don't have to like do any of the business of it. And I think in Buried Beds, doing the business of being an artist was something that was really hard. And I think we were medium successful, but also like, it just wasn't the piece I loved. But walking away from that, there's still the art piece of it. There's still the piece of you that like, that needs to express yourself and wants to like, work through what's going on in your head. And I feel like songwriting for me has always been a way to like work through. It's a way for me to better understand the world and to better understand other people and to better understand myself. And so I think songwriting, like whether or not I was going to put it on an album and release it, it was always there. I was always writing the songs. And I think with Because Become, it was just a sense of like, what does it sound like if I'm not in a band? What does it sound like if I'm not in collaboration with my best friend since childhood? What does it sound like when I'm not writing for a specific project that has a specific sound? Like, what is my sound? What does Eliza Hardy-Jones sound like? And that was super exciting. And that was like how I approached that record. And I will say I probably spent 6 months writing songs where I was like, boo, not my sound. Don't like it, trash it. And then eventually landed on a song where I was like, oh, I love this. I think this is what I sound like. Because, it's like classical music, folk music, Grace Potter, rock and roll, Tina Turner, Bacchanal, like I have all of these things going on. It was like, what is it, what is it when it's just me and there's nobody else telling me what it's supposed to be? And I loved that process. It was super fun.
Well, it's I don't think it's, I don't want to use the word weird, but to find, yourself and find your sound and then not really kind of release something again for another, however many years.
Yeah, it's been a bunch of years.
Yeah, it's been some time. What was kind of the decision? What was the decision to kind of do something again, like to kind of revisit yourself?
Well, I will say that it's not that I didn't do anything. It's just that I
sure.
did something different. I spent, like, in the interim, I wrote and performed and then recorded the record of a musical with Martha Graham Cracker called Lashed But Not Leashed. So that was an incredible writing, recording, performative process. So I made that record. I was doing a bunch of things, and the large project that I was working on was this big quilt project. I don't know if you know anything about this quilt project.
And we're going to get to that. Don't you worry.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was like many years of intense labor. And so it was sort of a thing of like, I wasn't missing the piece of like, okay, well, I need an artistic voice, or I need to find myself. That quilt project was that for me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when I finished making Because Become, I think that was like a moment where I was like still reaching for what I thought was like the success I was looking for, which was like, I put out Because Become with the intention of getting a record label, getting a booking agent, and being able to sort of be a solo, successful touring artist. And that just didn't happen. With that record, like, I felt so proud of it, and I really believed in it. And I felt like I had a lot of feedback from record labels and agents and publishers and all this stuff where it was like, oh, this is amazing. And like, whoever puts this out is going to have a real hit on their hands, but it won't be us,
Right. Yeah.
And I found that experience really painful and disheartening. And I just don't ever want to feel like that again. And I think that it's not about like, I didn't want to expose myself to the pain. It was just like, I just needed to find a different way to feel successful. I needed to find a different way to feel like I was making something valuable for myself, but that also wasn't just like navel gazy and, like I just wanted to find something. And I think that quilt project sort of became that for me of like, this is something that I can pour myself into, and I can like use as an avenue to understand people and understand myself and understand the world and process what I'm experiencing as a person who lives in this world. And I can not have attached to that an idea about like, and maybe I'll get a booking agent for my quilts,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a perfect segue to talk about the quilt project. For those who don't know, kind of walk them through, the listeners, what exactly this project is, because it's absolutely amazing. It blows me away. It's one of it's incredible art, like, first of all, and I also find it completely wild that somehow even in quilting you found a way to collaborate. So,
well, honestly, quilting is super collaborative.
That's true.
Just as a tradition, after you think about the quilting bee, women together, helping each other with their stitches. The way that the quilt project came together is that I sort of come from a long tradition of textile makers. My great-grandmother worked in a garment factory after coming to the United States from Italy. Her daughter, my grandmother, was an incredible seamstress, made all of my clothes. So I always loved to sew, and early in my early 20s, I started making quilts, as a way to show love for people. That's a wonderful thing about the quilt tradition, is that it's all about marking occasions and marking time and showing love and giving somebody the love of your time. Like when you give somebody a quilt because they had a baby, you could just buy them a blanket, but you're giving them a quilt because you're saying like, I spent 75 hours making you something beautiful because I love you that many. Like, I love you that much. And so quilting for me was always a way of just like giving somebody something to show them how much I loved them, but also something that they could use and, the babies could throw up on, or they could sleep under, or, whatever it was. So after I made Because Become, I was on tour with Grace Potter. I was on the internet. I got a message from this artist named Daria Orlova, who is an artist who lives in the Russian Arctic. And she said, I found your album on Russian Facebook, and I would really love to talk to you about it. And I was like, what a funny message. Um, and I was just like in my season of yes, of like, say yes to the world. And I was like, yes, Daria Orlova, let's chat. And it was awesome. I had this like awesome conversation with her, and she was doing this incredible project where she would paint people's shadows, like live, people would stand in a room and she would paint their shadows and make these beautiful murals. And my album had sort of a shadow theme, and she was like, can I use your music for this? And I was really excited about it. And she said, I want to put you in touch with the woman in charge of the exhibition who runs the Arctic Art Institute. And so then I find myself in the front cab of the tour bus at like 6 o'clock in the morning, Skyping with this woman I've never met from the Russian Arctic. And we just had this amazing conversation about like the Russian Arctic art scene and the music and the textile traditions. And she was like, oh, like a big part of our art is the textile traditions and quilting. And I was like, oh, I'm a quilter. And she was totally blown away that I was a quilter. And then she asked me like, well, what do you know about Russian folk music? And I was like, oh, well, I actually grew up in this family. My aunt had a Russian lover. And so I grew up listening to Russian folk music. And my dad actually just came by with this stack of handwritten Russian folk songs from her, from my aunt's Russian lover. And she was so tickled that like I would know anything about Russian folk traditions, folk art, folk music. And she said to me, like, if you come up with a project, we'll host a residency for you in the Arctic. And this is 2016. So it's pre-modern craziness with Russia,
Sure.
Post-Cold War Russia, but pre-Trump Russia.
Yes.
And so I was like, oh my gosh, like who gets to go to the Russian Arctic? This is so exciting. And so I just invented this idea that I would marry ideas around folk music and quilting. So what I did was I traveled around the Russian Arctic and the American South. I interviewed women about their lives, and I had them share folk music with me, with the caveat being that it had to be a folk song that has no author. It just had to be music that just sort of bubbles up from the ether and becomes, part of how we understand our cultural context. And then I invented a transcription method. So my quilts are exact musical notations of the song that the woman sings for me. So they're not artistic impressions. They are exact musical transcriptions. They can be read like pieces of music. And then I created this quilt series of Russian and American folk songs as sung by women from these different places. And for me, it was a project about community and communication between the American South and the Russian Arctic, and, what are the things that connect us as people and what are the things that separate us as people. And it was really focusing on women and women's work. Textile work is traditionally women's work, and the sort of contribution that women have made to global culture for the last, thousands and thousands of years. So it was a really fun project, but sort of an oral history, quilting, music, multimedia thing. And I got to travel to all of these incredible places. I got to do this residency in the Russian Arctic. I got to meet all of these incredible people, both in the United States and Russia, and made this beautiful project. And I ended up getting to show it at my favorite quilt museum, the International Quilt Museum in Nebraska. And they ended up acquiring the collection. So the collection now is permanently housed at the International Quilt Museum, which has just been so wonderful.
Yeah, it's like that's like a creative masterpiece to me. Like that is like no, like honestly, like not. I mean, like it touches everything. Like the cultural nature, like the just artistic nature of how they look and whatnot. Like just there's so much there. The historical nature. Like there's just so much involved in it that like when I first read about it, I was just like, how have I not heard about it? Like how have we not been discussing like this forever? Like because like even like kind of capturing the songs in that manner, like any single piece of this wows me, okay, but all of it together just absolutely blows my mind. It's absolutely stellar, and I implore anybody listening to seek out the pieces that are on your website to be able to like take a look at them, because it's absolutely like just mind-numbingly beautiful.
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I like I try, but but no, it's really incredible, and it's just a testament to your creativity and your talent. One of the things that I find really interesting about it is like you created the kind of the key essentially, like
Hmm.
what was that process like? Did it like was there like a lot of trial and error on what would work or
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like early on, I knew that like I came up with this concept and I just like, wrote a Katerina Sharova of the Arctic Art Institute. It was like, I'm going to do this. And I think she was like, what are you talking about? Like,
yeah
I don't know what you, and I was like, well, I'll make you one. Like, I'll come up with one. I'll like make just like like an example of something. And so I think I did like crawdad, like,
yeah
you a line and I get a pole. Like I just like picked some folk song and I just like then I spent, probably a month trying different ways of like, what does it look like if I did this? And what does it look like if I did that? But pretty quickly I settled on the idea that rhythm would be shape because rhythm is a measure of it's a distance of time, right? So like
hmm
a quarter note is the distance between two notes. And a half note is the distance between two notes. So if you're making something physical, then rhythm is still just going to be a distance. So my rhythms are distances. A quarter note is a 4-inch square, a half note is an 8-inch rectangle. So you're just literally moving through distances. And I could get very heady about like how you do smaller rhythms and larger rhythms and syncopations and slurs and all that stuff. But just know that shapes are rhythms. And then the next piece you have to figure out is pitches. And that was a harder piece where I was like, okay, how am I going to do this? And my first thought was there are 7 notes in a scale and there are 7 colors in a rainbow. So assign a color to a note and you've got it. But then I would have a whole series of quilts that all looked essentially the same, right? Like it was like all of those colors would be the same. And it also like didn't make sense to me from like like a nerdy classical music theory spiritual position of like the relationship between red and orange is not the same thing as the relationship between the first note and the second note of a scale. So I ended up going with this like very complicated thing where primary colors are primary chords. So I have these resonant anchors. And then, if I were teaching a music class and I have taught some music classes, I would go into more details about what it is. But essentially, like I just super nerded out on classical theory. But the root of that is that my grandmother, who, played in a pit orchestra, was a violin player, had synesthesia. So I grew up with her singing colors at me all the time, being like, this is the color red. What note is the color red? She had perfect pitch and synesthesia. I have neither synesthesia nor perfect pitch. So I'd be like, I don't know what we're singing. But she saw pitch as colors. So that really early on was just like, wow, synesthesia is a thing. So pitch is color. So like, what do I need to do? But I did a lot of research into like famous synesthetes and like, it's amazing. It's so nerdy, but it's really amazing at how people with synesthesia, and I'm just, looking at famous people with synesthesia, how their color charts are completely different. So
hmm
like Isaac Newton's C is totally different from Scriabin's C.
okay
And completely different from my grandmother's C,
yeah
which I just thought was beautiful. So I ended up with this sort of, I call it the resonant anchor theory, which is the theory that I came up with for my quilts.
it's
Yeah.
awesome. Have you ever thought about like creating a text or a document or a lesson in kind of teaching what you've created?
So I do, I have taught it. I have given lectures and taught some classes, sort of in 3 arenas. Most of the lectures I give are to quilt guilds because it's mostly at its core a quilt project.
Sure.
But even within the quilt guilds, I offer 2 lectures. One is about like, let me just share the project with you, and I'll talk to you about the textile traditions of the Russian Arctic and the textile traditions of the American South and how music and textile can move together, and just sort of talk about my quilts and share my quilts. The other lecture I give is about like the actual theory of how I did that technically, with the idea of like maybe that would inspire somebody to think of their own way to incorporate rhythm into a quilt, or incorporate pitch into a quilt, or incorporate a song into a quilt. I've also taught some art students, and then I'm approaching that project from a purely aesthetic principle of like, how am I using color theory to represent pitch? How am I using color resonance to represent pitch resonance? And talking to them about like the project from a super artistic place. And then I've taught a music class where I've talked about non-traditional music notation and how I invented mine and how they might be able to invent theirs, and other people who have invented non-traditional music notations, and how we think about music, and how the way that we sort of adapted a singular kind of music notation affects us as we play music and learn music and move through the world. So I do teach those classes. I have one coming up in April. I have a quilt lecture coming up.
That's awesome.
But I've never thought about just like writing a book about like, here's my theory and here's the bottom of all this, because I feel like it's not the important part of the project. It's the fun part of the project for me.
Yeah.
But I don't know that like, you know, like really getting behind like why I think that the 2 and the 4 are sympathetically vibrating is going to change your experience of the quilt. I think what will change your experience of the quilt is learning about the woman who sang it.
Okay.
And learning about the place that woman came from. And in quilts, there's sort of an extra design where you actually like stitch the layers together. And those stitched designs are always regional textile designs. So I think talking about like, this is the embroidery design from the village that this song comes from. Like that's such a richer and more exciting way to approach the project from my perspective. So I've never written out like exactly my method, because I think maybe it's probably most interesting just to me.
Oh, I don't know about that. I wouldn't be so sure. I wouldn't be so sure. So post quilting, and we kind of touched upon it earlier, but we have to talk about it. You are the vocal coach of the offensive line of the Philadelphia Eagles, which is probably the weirdest, most awesome resume line ever.
Yeah.
Now I know it's dumb to even say this, but you never imagined it would be as enormous as this has become, right?
No, never. Yeah. No, absolutely not. I mean, honestly, it really like, even, you know, we've now done it 2 years. That first year, I think the expectation was like, maybe we'll raise $100,000.
Yeah.
And we raised $1.5 million. Like it was, and even just like having to deal, you know, we're pressed vinyl, and I didn't do any of this. This is all Connor Barwin, who's the producer of all this, and then Charlie Hall, who's a sort of musical producer, are the masterminds behind all of this. But just like, you know, checking in and being like, oh, how's this going? And being like, you know, we're rushing with the record plan because we got to print new records because, you know, there's like this huge demand, and, you know, you want to be able to have as many people buy the record as possible because we're raising all of this money for Philadelphia charities. But I mean, it was really like, there was absolutely no sense that it was going to be as big as it was.
No, it was crazy. I mean, like, I remember when our pal Maggie first told me about it. In my head, I was like, oh, a football team doing music. Like, I know this. And she was like, no, this isn't a joke. This isn't like the Super Bowl shuffle. This is like legitimate. And then I heard it, and like, I was like dumbfounded how good it was, like just dumbfounded. And then like beyond like how good musically it was, but how good those 3 guys were.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And like, I never knew, like, and so then like, you know, I think I talked to Charlie maybe right before it came out, but like the pre-sales were like crazy through the roof. So like, to see the entire life of this thing go from like, yeah, we're going to raise some money, to like, we have done ridiculous work in this community, like, has just been amazing. And then the second year, like, all right, I love Jason Kelsey beyond belief, but I never, ever in my wildest dream saw the Kelsey experience becoming what it has become. And just the timeliness of Travis starting to date Taylor as this album comes out. Like, that's lightning in a bottle stuff. Like, you can't.
It was, we were not prepared for that.
No, I guess not. I guess not. And then seeing Fairy Tale like hit #1 on the charts, like that's unbelievable. And then like one of if not the last tweet from Shane McGowan is about that cover. Like the whole thing makes my head explode. Like it's just so wonderful. But it all starts with you guys created something beautiful. Like you guys put something together that wasn't a joke. Like it's actually a like those two albums are in my Christmas rotation, and not because I'm an Eagles fan, though maybe part of it, but but mostly because they're phenomenal Christmas albums.
Yeah, I mean that was when Connor, who is really puts all of this together. Connor's so amazing. First approached Charlie, about like, hey, Jason wants to make this Christmas record. Like, what do you like? How would we do that? How does a person make a Christmas record? And essentially Charlie just said like, I'm down, but like only if it's not a joke. Like I'm not making a joke album with you. And those guys immediately were like, no, we don't want it to be a joke. Like this is just something like we think it could be really fun, and we love music and we sing together in the locker room, and like we don't know how to make a record, but, maybe we can record a few songs. And just, Jason's idea of just like, I want every kid in Philadelphia to get a Christmas present. So like, let's raise money for the, Children's Crisis Treatment Center. It just felt like such a beautiful idea for Charlie. And, Charlie is such an incredible connector of people. He's so good at curating a vibe and curating just like this perfect atmosphere so that like everybody could just come in and experience the joy of their friendship, the friendship between the players, between Jason and Jordan and Lane, and then just kind of lean into that idea of like, this is all just about joy and friendship and giving. And so then all the musicians are showing up with no ego. Like just the whole thing was this like egoless joy train. And I think that translates. When you listen to the records, you just think like, boy, this sounds like real fun.
Yeah. Did you get a stop motion person made of you when they did the video?
I did. And I'm so touched that my little stop motion person is pregnant, because I was pregnant for the making of that second album, which was really special for me. I didn't get to keep mine. I know the guys got theirs, but I did get to like see my cute little stop motion character, which was so sweet. I was so honored to make the stop motion special.
That's amazing. The whole thing is just absolutely wonderful. Like it boggles my mind that it even exists, and it's just so perfect though. Like it's great.
It's been like one of the most joyful projects I've ever been involved with. It's making records is always fun, and I love making records. I love being in the studio. I love doing it, but there are often moments where like, you're doing something that's so vulnerable that like there can be moments of tension. And I feel like these Christmas records, like you just don't have that. It's just all joy. It's such a joy to work with those guys. Those guys are incredible. And this year, in addition to Lane and Jason and Jordan, we also got to have Jordan Davis come in. And getting to work with Jordan Davis was like just one of the most fun things I've ever done as a vocal coach. Like it's just been such a rewarding experience. And I honestly I'm so lucky I get to be part of it. I can't believe I get to be part of it. It's so fun.
It really it's got to be wonderful as a lifelong Eagles fan also to just be able to be a part of like the legacy, because you are now like a part of Eagles history. Yeah.
And like I am, like I said, wanted to be the first professional female NFL player. I grew up in Philadelphia. I am a lifelong Eagles fan. I am not, I think it wasn't a thing of just like coming in. It wasn't like, whoa, like who are these guys? Like coming in, I was like, oh boy, Jason Kelsey, like this is going to be amazing. But but we also had no idea of like, can they sing? Like, what are we, how much work are we talking about here? And just being able to walk in that first day and be like, oh man, like these guys can sing. This is going to be great. This is going to be so
Yeah.
fun.
Well, it's funny you say that because I didn't know about this. I only heard it the day that he retired. WXPN replayed something from like 2013 when he was in studio with Connor, and he did a acoustic cover of Jason Isbell's "Cover Me Up." And yeah, oh yeah,
Oh my gosh,
yeah. And
good.
first of all, you should listen to it because it's a testament to how good of a coach you are. Because it was a little rough, but it was there. Like I didn't know. Like I had never known that. Like this was something that he was so passionate about.
Yeah.
When he brought in Santa's Night this time, like what was that like? Because
Oh
like
my God. It was incredible. So, like I said, like Charlie is just um the ultimate creator of space. He's just so good at creating space for things to grow and bloom and for relationships to sort of grow. So we were in the studio recording tracks for some of the other tunes. And he had said, like, okay, but we need to like, at noon, Jason's gonna come in, we gotta work on this other thing. And we were all like, what are we working on? He was like, it's a surprise. It's a surprise. So us as the musicians, we had no idea what was about to happen. And so then Jason shows up and it's like, all right, here's a surprise. Jason wrote a song and we're going to figure out like if we can, turn it into something special. And then, so it really was like the moment, and, the film crew is there, the moment that we're all in that room together, there's no preparation. Like it was just a purely magical experience of like, being so in awe of Jason, of just like, I can't believe you wrote this it's an incredible
it's
song.
beautiful. Yeah.
He's not a musician, like he's not a guy who's been spending the last 20 years of his life dedicated to the craft of songwriting. Like it's something that came from his heart and was so natural. And then it came together like all in that room, all in that moment of just all of us, again, like in collaboration and in community, in support of Jason's voice. Nobody's ego pushing through and being like, no, I really think we need to do this. It was just all of us being like, well, what if we did that? What if it's this or what if it's that? And everybody just working together to bring Jason's song to where, like, because he didn't know what the chords were. He just knew that, he was just like, here's the melody. And I was like, okay, well, here we go. Like, we're going to write the music underneath, and being able to come up with that just literally in that moment, with no preparation, with no like, okay, well, I got to really think about this. It was just the surprise of it all. I think just caught us all in this really beautiful moment of just creating something so special. And literally like just in that moment, it was like 40 minutes, song was done, laid down the demo. We were like off to the races.
Unbelievable. Yeah. It's almost insulting that he's a Pro Bowl center and also a quality songwriter. Like,
yeah.
And
I love
for us,
his
Jason.
voice. I love how he sings. All three of them, Jordan is clearly like, Jordan is as talented as any professional singer. I mean, his voice is really, truly remarkable. And Lane and Jason, though, just have such character to their voices. They're just so special and unique and rich and emotional. I love all three of their voices. It's been such a joy to work with them.
That's awesome. That's incredible. So spinning out of this, you finally return to putting out a solo album. And knowing that this album is kind of the seed of this album is the grief that you experienced. Mm-hmm. It's really hard for me I've been trying to figure out how to put this, but it's a beautiful album. And I don't it's really hard to I've been trying to figure out how to word like, hey, I really enjoyed listening to your grief. You know what I mean? Yeah. But it is like, it's so touchingly beautiful, like throughout the entire thing. First of all, it's called Pickpocket, and I completely forgot to mention this. And it comes out April 19th, I believe. Is that correct?
April 19th, yeah.
Walk as much as you're comfortable walking through kind of the genesis of this project.
Yeah. So, when I was saying, like, I have this last record that I put out and it was so long ago. And like, what did I do in the in between? And I worked on this big quilt project, and I, made Last But Not Least with Martha, and I worked on these Eagles records. But the other sort of long-term project that I worked on was trying to have a baby. So I spent 6 years in fertility treatments and doctor's visits, and it was a very long and very difficult process. And I really did not have much luck. It was just really, it was dark. It was a very dark period. And I think, that's was helpful to have the quilt project be like, I can just focus my creative energy here and continue to work on trying to get pregnant, and not have to like really work through it. But at some point, I'd come to sort of the end of that process, and I had really hit a bottom of depression and darkness and grief. And it was like, I think a lot of times with grief, you're thinking about like a single moment. You've lost somebody, or your marriage has broken up, or you've lost a parent, or you've lost a child, or whatever this is. And for me, the grief was this like slow erosion of my joy. It was the slow erosion of my body. It was a slow erosion of my sense of self. And I just sort of found myself really a stranger in my own body and dealing with this incredible grief, having experienced a miscarriage and an ectopic pregnancy and losing my embryos and just sort of losing the ability to be a mother. And so I ended up writing this album as a way to make sense of that, as a way to process those feelings. And I think for a lot of it, I did not ever necessarily anticipate it being a record other people would hear. I think a lot of it was just sort of like, I'm just going to like use the tool that I have to process how I'm feeling about this. It was also something I was experiencing really privately because I didn't want to talk to people about it because it just felt too sad. Felt like too sad. Felt like too heavy a burden to tell other people about. And so I think this was a way that I ended up telling a lot of people what was happening, was like being like, okay, well, I wrote this song and I'm going to send it to you and ask you for a drum part. And also I had a miscarriage.
Yeah.
It ended up being a way for me to like, to have that bridge to be able to bring people back in, and a bridge for me to be able to like process what was happening and to let go of that. And you said like, it's a really beautiful album. I think it's also like, I would say the saddest song on the album is like the jauntiest.
Definitely.
For me, This Is the Year is like the very saddest song on the album for me, but it came together in this like very bright and open and jaunty way. And recording it with Charlie from the War on Drugs and from the Eagles Project and my friend Nick, like it was a joyful day in the studio. Like the whole thing was really as joyful as it sounds, but it was just at the end of me processing, what had been really a very difficult period of my life. And the crazy piece of that is that like, I wrote all of those songs and worked it out, and I have a baby now. So, I have a 6-month-old, and I'm going to release this album. When he is 7 months old, I will release the album. And it's amazing to have written an entire record about like coming to terms with the fact that I would never be a parent, and releasing it into the world. And I'm a parent.
I'm not one to traffic in heady thoughts a lot, but when I do, I like to do it deeply. And I think there is something incredibly beautiful about that kind of acceptance, coming to that acceptance, and then being rewarded almost. Like it's magic. Like it's pure magic. And I don't think it coincidence either. I think giving yourself the permission, like I think of like Ballad for the Baron, which is like I said, it's hard to talk about the beauty in it, but like there's an acceptance in there that maybe your role is something else, that like that's when the things happen. Like I said, it's almost like you were gifted for your ascendance into acceptance. I don't know, like
yeah, and I will say that how I am a parent is that I was, again, in collaboration with my community. I am not genetically related to my child, although I carried my child. My husband and I have really close, dear friends who offered us an embryo. So we have our sweet baby, and he has his bonus family. He has a bonus brother and a bonus sister and a godmother and a godfather. We were able to do this because of this incredible gift, because of this incredible connection with these wonderful people who offered us the incredible opportunity. But the distance between like when that offer was made and when I was like, okay, yeah, like let's try that, was a lot around sort of like, I couldn't just be like, yes, I'm in this pit of grief. Let's do it. Let's do our last, hope. I was kind of like, I need time to be okay.
Yeah.
So that I'm saying yes to this because I'm okay. That I'm not saying yes to this because I'm broken.
Sure, of course.
So I think it was like the album was this way of like, okay, I'm okay. Like I am letting go of this grief. I'm letting go of this. And then if this doesn't work, because, I still have to get pregnant and maintain a pregnancy and, do all of that. There was no guarantee that even with the donor embryo that it would work. But I knew that starting that process, I had to be okay. And so there was some time in between when we initially talked about it and when we went ahead and gave it a shot, and it totally worked, which is very exciting. But it's such an interesting thing to be like releasing this album, which is essentially an album about being barren and having the opposite experience too.
Yeah, yeah, it's wonderful. Well, not the situation, but again, the wording.
But it's also like, I'm not the only person who has experienced this,
right?
And
like, I think that's what's really important about the album is like you're kind of, through collaboration. Like first of all, the fact that you were able to be vulnerable enough to invite people in to help you grieve, and I think that's kind of, you referred to the jaunty joyfulness. I think kind of that like knowing that you're not aloneness in it. Is what kind of gives a permission to be kind of joyful in like, hey, this is what I'm going through. And I think putting that out there for other people who are experiencing the same exact thing, across the world, like I think is awesome. Like it doesn't shy away from like all of the emotions that you experienced.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a real thing. It's and it's like, there's a lot of songs for breakups, and there's a lot of songs for, there's a lot of songs in the world for you to find, right? There's a lot of songs, and music is there for us as a healing place to say like, oh, like I'm going through this thing and this piece of music has been really helpful for me. There's not a lot of songs about being barren. There's not a lot of songs about having a miscarriage. There's not a lot of songs about losing yourself, losing your dream, losing your ability to like see your future the way you wanted to see it. And I think like whether or not you're a woman, you've had that experience, I think that experience of losing your ability to be who you thought you would be is a universal experience.
Yeah.
And I feel like for me, this album is not just like, I want other women who have experienced infertility to listen to this album and to feel seen and heard. It's like, I want people to listen to the album and see themselves in it and see where in their lives they had to let go of a dream or they had to face loss in that intense way, or they had to face violence.
Yeah,
either
sure.
personal violence or public violence, like the album was written in this place, but, not every single song is about like my personal journey with my body. There are songs, there's a song about a quilter on there. Yeah, like there are, it's a bigger record, but it's a record that is the theme of which is about grief and loss and finding a way out of that. So I hope that it's a comfort to everybody because everybody will have some huge moment of grief and loss in their life. It's just part of existing.
Yeah, hopefully it will act. Watch me do this as someone's quilt. And
yeah.
Sorry, I had to do it. No. Are you looking to? I know Drugs is going on tour this summer and fall, but are you looking to play any of this out or get this out there or?
Yeah, it's such a funny thing. Like with all of my other records, it's always been that I've been in a band or I've been a performer, and then I make the record so that I have something to play on stage. And this is like a totally different thing where it's like, I really just wanted to make the record. Yeah. So, I'm going to be doing a couple of things like for radio where I'm doing live performances and Maggie, our friend Maggie was like, well, call your band. And I was like, I don't have a band. I have to put a band together. I have to figure this out. But I do think at some point this year, I will do something fun in Philly, a release show, but in the sort of more traditional sense of like, yeah, I'm going to put the record out and I'm going to support it with a bunch of shows and I'm going to take it on tour. No, I'm not going to do that.
Because I'm curious, is this something I've talked to with a few people with something so personal, what it would be like kind of performing it live on stage, like.
Yeah. There was one of the songs I wrote the song Fall to Pieces, and I performed it live just on the piano as part of a dance piece. And it was just like sort of a collection of artists, dancers, and I might have been the only singer, but I think a lot of it was dancers. And it was just about like a piece about loss. And so I'd written this song about loss. And I was very much still in it. Like, I feel like now I'm sort of on the other side of it. But at the time, I was very much still in the middle of that experience, in the middle of feeling a stranger from myself and feeling broken and feeling lost. And like my entire body shook the entire time I played. And as soon as I walked off the stage, I just absolutely like broke down into tears and was, embarrassed. There's people around. I'm just like crying. And it was a very different, I perform a lot and it's really fun and I have a great time out there and it's a way to sort of let loose. And it was an experience of like, oh, that was not fun. That did not feel good. Like that felt terrible. My whole body felt horrible saying those words out loud in front of people. I hope that now, since I'm about getting ready to do it again, that won't be the experience.
Sure.
Again, because I'm sort of on the other side of that and I've had time and distance and, the incredible gift of motherhood to sort of soothe the pain. But yeah, I wonder what it would be like. I don't know that I would want to sing those songs every night.
Right. No, for sure. I mean, like I've had experience with, I performed a song that was I had this guest on here, Laura Lizcano, who's a beautiful singer. And she referred to it as singing from the wound and not from the scar. And I was very deep in the wound and when I performed this song, and like you said, like it doesn't feel good. And like making and playing music is something I've done to feel good and to share like that kind of, and I did not like it. So I always find now, mind you, I could play that song now and I probably might not even be able to capture the emotion that I had when I wrote and recorded it. But at the time, like you said, there is some distance. So hopefully like there's kind of like that scarness in it.
Yeah. That's such a beautiful thing, playing from the wound or playing from the scar. It's a very different experience.
Yeah, it's wild. So this comes out on the 19th.
Yes.
This is your year, or this is the year, is the first single off of it, which comes out in a week, I think, or something like that.
Yeah.
And also like kind of, I think it features the title of the album in it as well, and is thematically kind of the driving thing. Any thought of doing a video or anything for it, or?
I have a wonderful video for it that
Oh,
will
it's
be released. Yeah. A really good friend of mine, Nikolai Fox, who's a wonderful musician and artist and filmmaker, made this beautiful video for This Is the Year where he did time lapse videos of trees.
wow.
And so it sort of like captures that sense of like moving through this time. And I think it also just like captures the sort of like the bittersweetness of it. Like it's a beautiful image, but it is also just like you're just enduring.
Sure.
You're just surviving. I love it. I can't wait for everybody to see it. Nikolai Fox is a wonderful artist and a long, long time friend. So it's been fun to somebody who I played bluegrass and old time music with. It was fun to be able to collaborate with him in this way.
That's awesome. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
Well, at this time, you want to go through my standard questionnaire? This is the Jauntlet. This is how I close all of my interviews with all of my guests. It starts with the one-hit wonders. The first one, Billy Joel or Elton John? Who do you prefer?
Elton John.
All right. Debbie Harry or Joan Jett?
Debbie Harry.
Okay. Aretha Franklin or Tina Turner?
Aretha.
I saw it coming. Nirvana or Pearl Jam?
Nirvana.
Okay. Janis Joplin or Stevie Nicks?
Stevie.
I like that there's no hesitation. You know what you like. I like
I'm
it.
in. I'm
You're
in.
not fighting. No fighting.
Yeah.
The big cliche, Beatles or the Stones?
Beatles.
And the final of the one-hit wonders, Bohemian Rhapsody or Stairway to Heaven?
Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah, I thought so.
I will say that when I was in high school, I was 18 years old and I was in a car and Stairway to Heaven came on and I was like, what is this? And everybody thought I was kidding. I was like, I've never heard this before.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's absolutely amazing. The second half of this is the top 10 countdown. I'm sure you know we use Jawn to be whatever you want it to be. It doesn't have to be music. Number one, what was your first Jawn? What was the first thing you were obsessed with as a kid?
The first thing I was obsessed with as a kid was musical theater.
Yeah?
I was very obsessed with musical theater.
So between the work you did with Martha Graham Cracker and also the assistance you gave your brother on the thing, the snowman kind of retelling or whatnot, have you thought about doing any kind of musical fully yourself?
No, here's the thing. I'm a terrible actor. Like a truly terrible actor. I have like maybe my most embarrassing story is the one audition I went on where I literally watched people's faces like crumble in front of me. Oh no. So no, I should not be allowed on stage other than to sing.
Fair enough. Number two, what's your current Jawn? What are you into now?
Textile history.
I love it.
Super obsessed.
Yeah, that's a fantastic Jawn. Number three, what was your first concert, first live show you saw?
This is a hard one because, like, are we talking about any concert? Because,
sure.
Like, I definitely went and saw the Philadelphia Orchestra a lot as a little kid. We went to the opera a lot as a little kid. So, like, as a little kid, lots of classical music. The first concert where I went to a box office and bought a ticket was Guar at the Trocadero.
Wow. That's amazing.
So it's definitely not my first. I'd been to punk shows before then. I'd been to folk music concerts. I'd been to like the Dirty Dozen brass band, street fair, but all as a kid. The first ticket I bought was to see Guar.
That's awesome. Did you make it out of the show without being covered in blood? Or
no, I intentionally I positioned myself like third row center so that I would just get absolutely doused. Yeah.
Well done. Yeah. I respect that a lot.
Yeah.
Number four, what was the last concert you went to?
The last concert I went to was this morning next door. I was able to bring my son and my husband next door. We have a good friend who's a Philadelphia musician who was in Like Moving Insects and Fan of Friends many, many years ago in the Philadelphia scene. Now performs as JM, and they have a performance tonight in West Philly that I knew I wasn't going to be able to go to, so we got to go to the rehearsal this morning. So my last concert was Joshua Marcus and Harmony Thompson singing their beautiful songs together.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Private showing. I like it. I like it. Nice flex there. Number five, what was your favorite concert?
This is an impossible question. I spent like an hour talking to my husband about this today. You can't have a favorite concert. they're all so special and unique. I couldn't even like think of, I have no idea. I have no favorite concert.
That's fair. That's fair. You're allowed to have that. There's no judgment here.
Yeah.
There's no grades. There's no scores. I'm not gonna
come up with one. I couldn't.
We're not gonna get to the end, and I'm gonna be like, well, I'm gonna have to mark you as incomplete on this.
She wouldn't commit.
That's right.
Yeah.
Number 6. Who have you never seen live that you wish you would have? They could be living or dead.
Jawn Prine.
Oh, beautiful answer.
Yeah.
Beautiful answer.
So heartbroken that I will never get to see Jawn Prine live.
Yes, that's incredible. Yeah, it's wild because like, I start to like think about like in regards to this question, like eras too, like what era I would like to see, and someone like Jawn Prine, there's no pinpoint for me. Like it would be any point in his entire career would have been perfect. Would have
been perfect. Yeah. Yeah.
That's an awesome answer. Awesome answer. Number 7, name an unappreciated Jawn, something you wish had more shine to it.
Well, last night, the band The Teeth played one of their reunion shows at the church. And I think The Teeth are one of the like all-time unappreciated Philadelphia bands where when they were doing their thing, I honestly thought like this will be the biggest band that ever comes out of Philadelphia. Like this is the band that's going to break through. And then they just didn't. So
yeah,
and now, 10 years later, they're playing these reunion shows and people are losing their minds, and everybody should lose their minds because that band's incredible.
Great answer. Yeah. This scene has seen so many bands that like blow me away that like never broke, and for multitude of reasons, like and some not even like they couldn't get along. It's just like, well, it didn't happen. It just didn't happen.
Happen. Yeah.
and it is amazing to see like a band like The Teeth kind of get a little bit of their due. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But like all of a sudden there's like, there are kids at the show, at the show at the church who know the lyrics of the songs. I'm like, these kids were not going to shows in 2007.
Yeah, some of them were, probably playing with crayons and stuff like that at that point. It's beautiful. Number 8, name your favorite album. Also a bullshit question, I understand.
Yeah, but I do have 2 standard all-time favorite albums, which is Joni Mitchell's Blue and Kate Bush's Hounds of Love. Those are my, like, they pretty much always float to the top of, like, if you're going to ask me what my favorite album is, it's going to be one of those 2.
It tracks, too, if you kind of marry those 2 and listen to your music. Like, yeah, that makes sense. That absolutely makes sense. Yeah. Number 9, name an artist whose output you'll consume anything they put out.
So there is only one artist who I have listened to absolutely everything they have ever put out, and it's Jawn Prine.
Oh, okay. All right. Yes. Yeah. I like it. Back to the favorite album thing, though. It just clicked in my head. Joni Mitchell was Charlie's pick on that as well. So,
that's
but
so
it wasn't
fun.
Blue.
It wasn't Blue. Was
it? Take a guess. No, it was Hejira.
Hejira. Yeah. Hejira's an incredible album.
Yeah, which, it made sense when he said it. I was like, it tracks. And the 10th and final of the top 10 countdown. What is your favorite Jawn of all time? Again, can be anything you want it to be.
My favorite Jawn of all time is Andrew Jones, my sweet husband.
It's a beautiful answer. I love it. That's so cool. So the Pickpocket comes out April 19th. This Is Your Year comes out next week, which will be in the past because I record these things in the future, or I release these things in the future. I record them in the past. Whatever. Yeah. You know what I mean.
I know what you meant.
People know what I meant. If anybody would like to track you down on the internet, what's the best way to find you?
The songs will be on all of the regular streamable sites, but I do have a website, elizahardyjones.com, where you can check out all of the quilts if you would like, but also all of my records past and present will be up on there. And I'm on Instagram, but I'm not real good at social media, so if you want to see pictures of mountains and turtles, you can give me a follow.
It's amazing. Eliza, thank you so much for doing this. Not just for doing this, but for all of the beautiful work you've created, both musically and quiltily. Is that a word? It's not a word. It is now. But no, seriously, thank you for everything you've done creatively, because it's absolutely inspiring, and I'm so glad we got a chance to talk.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time and for listening to the music. And I'm glad that you found some beauty in it. Thank you so much.
My thanks again to Eliza for joining me on the show today. Eliza's album Pickpocket is out on April 19th on all streaming services. A limited edition translucent lavender vinyl is also available for pre-order. You can find links for that, as well as links to her previous releases and her quilting project at www.elizahardyjones.com. And you can find Eliza on the socials at Eliza Hardy Jones on Instagram and Twitter X, and on Facebook at EHJ Music. Links to all of those, as always, are in the show notes. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to the Yo, That's My Jawn podcast, wherever you get your podcasts from. And gang, it is never too late to get yourself a super awesome Jawn Scout Merit Badge for Citizenship of the World just by rating and reviewing us. Don't forget to visit www.yothat'smyjawn.com for the link tree with links to articles, merchandise, and all of the previous episodes of this podcast, guest appearances on other podcasts, and more. And while you're there, be sure to sign up on our mailing list to get all of the updates delivered straight into your inbox. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/YoThat'sMyJawn for updates and live streams. Follow us on Instagram, Threads, and Twitter X at Yo That's My Jawn, and search Yo That's My Jawn on YouTube to find the Yo That's My Jawn YouTube channel. Like and subscribe the heck out of that ish. We want to hear from you. Reach out, and touch some Jawn. Busy bee over here. It's no rest for the wicked, they say. I'll sleep when I'm dead, they say. Well, I pray that isn't for a very, very long time. Blue skies. Until next time, everybody.
That's my Jawn.
Displace the guilt and embrace the pleasure. You taste it, things that don't need to be measured.
Yo, That's My Jawn is a Lonely Monk production. Written and produced by yours truly, Nate Runkle. Theme song by me, under the moniker Nate 3.0. Special thanks to Fox Run Brands, DX Ferris, Andrew Scott, Maggie Poulos, Dan Drago, Natalie Runkle, and the beautifully vibrant and wickedly stunning Katie Dovney. If you or anyone you know has any ideas they would like to share or any guests they would like to hear on the podcast, please feel free to reach out to us at yothat'smyjawn@gmail.com or hit us up on the socials at Yo That's My Jawn. Until next time, be sure to displace the guilt and embrace the pleasure. Tilt your head back and shout to the world, Yo, that's my Jawn.